Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in.
She has a wonderful personality. She really does.
You are listening to Talking with Gloria.
Let's take a walk on the wild side.
With your host, Gloria Ponziano.
Emergency. My mommy and Daddy are having a fight.
Is she hitting her?
I'm talking to the police, Mommy. Stop it! The baby! Stop it! Can you come to the police, please?
Okay, we're going to be there. What's going on?
They're having a fight because this has been going on forever and ever. Oh my God!
What's the matter? Hello? Shit.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Talking with Gloria. I'm your host, Gloria Ponziano. And I'm sure if you just tuned in, that was a bit of a shocker and certainly not the norm for this show. However, today is the last day that the Talking with Gloria show is going to be on for December. And as you know, I dedicated all of December's shows to nonprofits here in this area. And today's show is all about CASA, about an organization that strives to help women and children escape domestic violence if they're being threatened. And we wanted to start this show off tonight with something that is a reminder to all of us as to the violence that's going on in this nation every day. Now, I booked this show several weeks out. And last week, the nation was literally, actually the world was literally rocked by the killings that took place in Connecticut. The social media has been lit up like a Christmas tree with people screaming against gun control and pointing fingers on where the problem lies. Is it the violence? Is it mental health? Is it guns? What's the problem? So I couldn't have timed this show any perfectly than today. And I hope you're tuning in and please listen to my guest. Joining me in the studio is Linda Osmondson, CEO of CASA. Hi, Linda.
Hello, Gloria.
And that tape that we listened to is called the Lisa tape because that's the name of the little girl that made that 911 call. Tell us a little bit about her.
Well, actually, I didn't know very much about her. We've used that tape for a lot of years. This past summer, I've actually got to meet her. Lisa was 6 years old when she made that phone call, and she's now, I think, in her late 20s. I'm still pretty raw about what happened even that many years ago and her experience growing up. She, I think at about 11, was signed over that tape and let us, really didn't realize that we were using it as a training tape for many years until she got to be an adult. But it has been a very useful tape. I think it helps people understand. Sometimes people think that, well, that domestic violence, well, that just happens to women and that's what they like or that's what they choose, but I think it helps them understand that, first of all, women don't choose domestic violence. And second of all, it always affects the children. And it affects them in very dramatic ways, as the tape shows.
Right. And of course, with what happened last week in Connecticut, like I said, everybody's emotions are pretty raw. Now, you and I were talking moments before the show started, and you said that there were even warning signs that you could spot. Now, obviously, FBI does their profiling, and we know that. And I know that this is strictly your opinion. But what are your takes on that?
The things that we see in almost all cases, domestic homicides, and this was a domestic homicide.
Yes,
Remember, this young man killed his mother first.
Right.
So in almost all domestic homicides, there are warning signs. There are, lots of times friends and family know that violence is going on. Lots of times friends and family know that this child or this adult is very troubled, angry, has used violence in the past. And I think in this case, we knew there was a lot of trouble going on with this child. And, there were lots of guns in that house. The mother was a gun aficionado, which is certainly her right. But, you mix those two together and you've got a very volatile situation, a very scary situation. And you've got a child that is angry and knows how to use a gun and used it.
Right.
And the rest is history.
Now, obviously, whenever, and this is not, I have to say to my listeners, and they all know me to be a very positive, and I always try to empower people, but this is something that you just can't stick your head in the sand and say, well, let's just love one another. I mean, I would love for the world to be like that, but that's not the reality.
Right.
And to ignore it and not to address it and not to see where we as a society, where can we help? What can we do? I mean, where do you begin to unravel a problem of this massive size? Where does it start, Linda?
Well, mostly children grow up in homes where there is violence. And that, when we look at the homicides, the domestic homicides, we have a fatality review team here that looks at all the domestic homicides. Almost always we can find friends or family that knew something was going on. And the fact was that they didn't know what to do. The very first thing they can do is call CASA or call the organization like CASA. Our crisis line number is 727-895-4912, 727-895-4912. You can call that number, and we can talk you through. We can listen to you. You can tell us what's going on, what you've seen. We can then talk you through some ideas. You can always do a safety plan for the woman and the children.
I was going to ask you about that. Isn't there something on the website where it's the woman can actually kind of be anonymous? So that maybe if it's an abusive husband or boyfriend or whatever, they can't find out that the woman called for help or... Yeah,
we have actually an exit now on every single page that you can push, and that sort of deletes your history there.
That was brilliant.
So if you're a survivor looking at our webpage, and most of the domestic violence web pages have that capability because we know that abusers can follow them and realize that they're looking for help. And abusers have this uncanny way of knowing when they've kind of crossed the line and they back up really fast and become affectionate and happy and sweet again, or promise her they'll go to counseling or they'll go to church or they'll go to, whatever she wants them to do. And, they're very manipulative. Right. So it's hard to predict what they're going to do, and we as human beings are hopeful people.
Right.
And
we want to believe the best.
Absolutely. And women in particular, I think, are socialized to believe the best and to keep working. And, we're all told that, when you get into a relationship, it's not always roses, that there are things we have to struggle through. There are things that you're going to work through. And so, in domestic violence relationships, sometimes we have this guy that's kind of a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. So he's sweet and loving and affectionate and fun, and then he's not. And and I always say there are some women that are abusive as well. There are also gay men that are abusive to their gay partners. There are lesbians who are abusive to their partners.
Okay.
So it's mostly females that are victims. Mostly abusers are males, but not in every case.
Right.
So
so you're not obviously this is not exclusive to women.
Exactly.
But we use that as an example when we're talking this for discussion.
That's right. It's like it's kind of like breast cancer. Mostly breast cancer attacks women, but it attacks some men as well. So it's the same kind of thing. And so men who are out there being abused, include yourselves in this. But it there are almost always signs. The neighbor sees something, the school teacher sees something, the family sees something, and they don't know what to do. So the very first thing you can do is, if she comes to you, the victim comes to you, listen.
Do they though? I mean,
yeah, they do. And what unfortunately for victims is they tell people, and people don't listen. They don't believe them because remember, these guys only beat her, or only violent to her. He's a nice guy to his boss. He's a nice guy to the neighbors. He wants everybody else to think he's a great guy. So sometimes she'll say something to a neighbor or a family member who says, well, that must be you that's causing that because he's such a nice guy. So
Gosh.
she kind of feels like she's crazy, and
Guilty,
she's been
too.
she
Yeah.
feels guilty, and she gets shut down, and so she then stops telling people. So we tell victims to tell people until they listen, and pick somebody that you can trust, and tell your story. And if that person doesn't listen, then let it go and find somebody else. But we as the community have to listen, because lots of times victims do tell people,
Right.
do tell us, and we just don't believe them. And we don't listen. We don't want to believe them, because we have this vision of what a victim looks like. And quite frankly, a victim looks like anybody out there.
Right.
Looks like you, looks like me.
Mhm.
It's not somebody that looks like somebody else. The victims are not always black. They're not always any kind of ethnicity, any kind of church going, any kind of, if they're Jewish, they can be Catholic, they can be Buddhist, they can be anything out there. Victims are all kinds of people.
Right.
And they can be wealthy
and you
and
kind
poor.
of think that a victim would be somebody that would be maybe a little bit of an introvert. I mean, I'm just going off the top of my head
Sure.
as somebody that doesn't know anybody that is being abused.
Mm-hmm.
But you would think that they would be a little introverted, and maybe not, though. It
Sure.
just
Yeah, we used to think, in fact, there was some kind of a characteristics for there was some kind of typical characteristics for victims. In fact, many victims have high self-esteem, and the abuser thinks, well, okay, it's like a challenge to the abuser. And if you live in a relationship for long enough, for 3 months, 3 years, 30 years, and you're told you're stupid and you're ugly and you're a bad wife and you're a bad mother and you're a bad person, after a while you just and the person that tells you that is the person that swore to love you, promised to love you, maybe even married you.
mm-hmm.
You then you start believing them, that what they're telling you, that maybe I am a bad person, maybe I am, and it's like water dripping on a rock. Eventually, it wears it away, and she begins to feel like, coupled with the fact that abusers isolate their victims, so they stop allowing them to have friends, they stop allowing them to call their family. Little by little, sometimes they stop allowing them to go to work. Just little by little. So it doesn't happen overnight. You don't really see the signs easily or quickly. And so,
Do you think that domestic violence, does it start statistically? Does it kind of start first with verbal or emotional abuse?
Always.
Or control?
Almost always. Victims will say, well, it's the first time he's ever hit me. But if we talk to them and interview them, we will find that it's really about power, it's about control, and that he's been doing controlling things to her for a long time. And
she never saw that as a sign, because we look for, until he raises his hand to smack me, it's not really abuse.
Well, and some of those controlling things, like with young people, I will talk to a young woman, maybe he's given her a cell phone, and she's excited because she didn't have a cell phone before.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what she doesn't understand is that cell phone is a tracking tool, and he can track her, and he can find her, and he texts her, and if she doesn't text right back, where are you? Who are you with? Why didn't you respond immediately? So it becomes another controlling tool. But for her, he loves me. He gave me a cell phone. I'm excited. So those are the kind of things that don't look on the face of it like they could be problematic. And for this very cyber conscious world, cyber stalking is a particularly big problem,
huge.
With domestic violence victims, with former domestic violence victims, with young people that don't know they're domestic violence victims.
Tell our listeners how is it a tracking tool with social media or Facebook or
all of those things,
leave a history, obviously.
Yes, absolutely a history. And if you text somebody and expect them to text back immediately and they don't, that's one thing. Most cell phones have a GPS tracking system, so they can actually tell the abuser exactly where you are with that cell phone at any moment. So you can turn that off if you know it's there.
If you know, right.
And not all people, I'm not so cell phone. I use one, of course, but I'm not quite as savvy as many younger people are.
And the phones they just keep changing and they do improving.
They do. And so not everybody always realizes that function is on. And so that's a tool. You can put a little, the little bugs that you can put in a VCR or a TV or some other electronic piece of equipment are very tiny now. They don't have big signs and advertise, here I'm tracking you, and so there are all kinds of ways that people who are particularly cyber savvy can track their victims, and unknowing to the victim. It's pretty creepy to get up in the morning, leave your house, and get a phone call from your abuser who says, I just saw you leave your house. You're wearing a pink dress. You know,
Oh,
you have this
freaky.
on, you know, it's very, you know, and I just saw your car parked. It was right here. Or to even come out, things that happen to victims often, again, on the face of it, don't look abusive. You come home and you find you come out to go home from work and your car is full of roses. Okay, that sounds really cool, doesn't
It's
it?
a positive negative
You know,
right there.
you know, and you think, okay, who's got a key to my car? Who can get
Yeah,
into
that's
this
what
car?
I'd be
Where
thinking.
these come from? You know, and if she's already had this history, she knows exactly what it is.
Mhm.
But, you know, does that play well in court? Does that play well with the police? They think,
Yeah,
you
right.
know, yeah, right.
You go to the police saying, you know, somebody broke into my car and gave me all
filled
these
with
roses.
That
Oh,
isn't, you know,
wow.
and they're going to think, well, you're nuts. And, you know, don't you appreciate that? Somebody loves you. Well, you know.
Well, that brings up
that's the
another
trouble.
point. How does a woman or man, but we're talking about
Generalities
victims,
here.
victims.
Mhm.
How does a victim go to the police? How do I want to ask this? Where do the police draw the line as far as lady, you're kind of exaggerating, or are they trained now to take every threat seriously
Well,
if she's scared?
if there's physical violence, of course, that is
Yeah, that's a
always, you
given.
always call the police. What I suggest when there's other things going on that aren't exactly physical violence, or like the roses, or that she keeps a notebook. And you just, you know, if she's left him and he's still showing up in her life, for instance, just keep notes of who was there, who saw it, when it happened. You know, keep that notebook and keep it carefully, because that's a kind of tool that the police really have to pay attention to, that they have to pay attention to in court. If you really kept that conscientious record, then that really does play
Constitutes,
better.
yeah, the
Really
evidence,
constitutes
really.
very good evidence. And if you have the names of people that are witnesses that were there, you know, and you have to be really careful. If you've left an abuser, I say to survivors, you know, the most commonly asked question of me is, why doesn't she just leave? For people
there
like
you
you
go.
that maybe have never been in an abusive relationship, or
Mhm.
for men that don't understand this, they just say, well, why doesn't she just leave?
Just leave.
Well, you know, she doesn't leave because she's really scared,
Mhm.
because he's made threats to her. He's made threats to her children. And she has reason to believe that those threats, he could carry out those threats.
Right.
You know, and the most dangerous time for her is when she does leave, because remember, domestic violence is about power and control. And so when he feels like he's lost power or lost control, that's really when
That's
she's
when
left.
they snap. Mhm.
That's when he then acts more strongly to get her back. You know, he uses his tools more strongly. Now, what I say to her is that, you know, when you're planning to leave, have a plan. Have a safety plan. Where are you going to go? Who are you going to go to? Who are you going to call?
And that's where CASA can
Mhm.
come in.
Absolutely.
Right?
And that's what we do. You know, in other words, if you're somebody whose friend is being abused, or your sister's being abused, or somebody that you know that you care about is being abused,
Mhm.
please call our crisis line number. It isn't just for the victims. It's also for you, because you're the helper. You're the one that cares. You're the one that is noticing things, kind of
Mhm.
pointing them out to her. Please call us, because we can then talk you through what else can you do? What are the danger signs? What are the things that you can do to talk to her and to help her with a safety plan? You know, does she have extra money set aside? Does she have
What if she
keys
doesn't
set
have any
aside?
of those things?
Well, you know, then she just can get up and call the police and leave. But if she makes a plan, she's going to be in much better shape.
Okay. We've all heard and seen stories on the news of, you know, a woman that had a restraining order against her partner, husband, partner, boyfriend, whatever. And sometimes when, you're going to have to help me out here, because I really don't know if getting restraining orders are a good thing. I've been asked that by women. Do you think I should get a restraining order? And my concern is, if you're afraid of your abuser, your husband or boyfriend or whoever, and you're already frightened and you're asking me, you know, do I think you should get a restraining order? If he's scared you enough to even have you ask that question, I would be concerned that a restraining order would incite his fury almost immediately once he finds out. Is that true? Am I off base there?
No,
And
you're
by
not. You're
no
not.
means an
And
expert.
you know, as a restraining order, or in Florida, we call them an injunction for protection, but they're known pretty typically as a restraining order.
Right.
It's just a piece of paper.
Right.
It doesn't stop a fist, doesn't stop a bullet. So she's the one that's going
Doesn't
to have
stop him either,
Nope.
really.
And but it is a good tool for police to have more evidence. It does show the court that you've made some efforts on your own behalf. It does show the court, when he goes for custody of the children, for instance, which abusers often do,
Mm-hmm.
that you've done the very best you can to try to protect yourself and them. It is a good tool for that. But it is really her decision to decide whether she should apply and whether or not she can be safe when she does apply. We always, when a survivor comes to us, we help her in the courts. We'll help her fill out that paperwork for those restraining orders or injunctions for protection in Florida, and we'll do a safety plan with her, helping her to think through what's she going to do if this gets worse. What's she going to do if he follows her in a car? What's she going to do? What she needs to have saved together? What she can do to protect her children? We will work with her to make that plan so that But in the end, I always listen to her, and if she's too afraid to get that restraining order
Mm-hmm.
because she thinks it'll cause him to escalate, then I believe her.
Yes.
She's the one that knows her situation better than
Right.
any of the rest of us do.
Right.
So I'm going to ask. I'm going to help her with a safety plan, and I'm going to say, well, what do you think will happen if we do this together? Do you think, you can never predict is it going to help or not?
No.
But if she really is terrified that because when you get a restraining order, you get a temporary restraining order, and usually most states it's available for about 15 days, and then you have to come back into court.
Oh,
And
really?
then he has a chance to tell his side of the story. So
Ugh.
you've got to make sure that you're safe. That's the time when I suggest that you might want to go stay with somebody else.
I was just going
Go
to
to
say,
shelter.
Linda, what do they do at that point?
Yeah.
Every 15 days? Is
Yeah.
it every 15
Well,
days?
no,
they
it's just
gotta-
it's 15 days, and then you go back to court and tell your side, and he tells his side, and the judge then will decide whether or not to extend that. In Florida, the law is that he can
Extend
extend
it how
it
long?
indefinitely.
Okay.
Now it's up to the judge. Now some judges might decide a year, 2 years, 5 years. In different states, the law is a little different, but it will be extended for at least a year in almost any state in the union.
I can understand how women could be very, very frightened by that in and
Absolutely.
of itself because there's no guarantee. If she has to show up in court for that,
Mhm.
I would think being in her shoes that I would be scared that he would, oh
Sure.
boy, this
Yeah,
is
and
really
it depends. It's always her judgment. We tell her what's going to happen. We give her sort of walk through the scenario with her, and if she feels safe enough to be able to do this, then we're there to support her. Usually, we can go send somebody to court with her. We're not attorneys, but we can send an advocate or a volunteer with her to court just to stand there with her because no matter what, it's scary to tell your story to a judge with your abuser in the same room. Now, there's bailiffs in that courtroom, so there's people there
Sure.
to protect you
Yeah,
while you're
you're
in that
there.
court, right? And we can ask a bailiff to escort you to your car. We can ask a bailiff to hold him for a half an hour until you
Mhm.
get out of the parking lot and gone. So there are lots of things we can do
Oh, okay.
to make it possible for you. We can make sure that when you put your name and your address on that application for an injunction for protection or restraining order, that address is not disclosed to him. So if you live in a shelter, if you live someplace else, then we can keep that address confidential. So there's lots of things we can do. So for some victims, the applying for that restraining order is something. It just gives her a sense of that there are more people on her side, and
Yeah.
it really gives her. It's on record now
Right.
that she's being abused. So but again, it's very individual, and I'm not gonna encourage. If a woman is terrified to get one, then I'm not going to force her, and I'm not going to encourage her even. I'm going to say you're the best judge of your own situation.
Now, is CASA a place where they can go and
Yes.
stay temporarily?
Yes.
And if so, for how long? And what are the steps? Let's say that a woman is abused. She calls
Mhm.
you and she musters up the courage to grab
Right.
her and her kids and come to you.
Right.
What's next?
If she calls us on our crisis line and we have space, we're going to just get a little bit of information from her, and she can go. Usually for us, she can go to the police department or the hospital, and we'll pick her up there. So
okay.
get to one of those public places. We usually don't go to her house because
Yeah,
we don't know
not
where
smart.
the abuser is. We don't want to put ourselves in danger too.
Sure.
But if she can get to the hospital, or if she can get to some kind of a public place, usually a hospital or police department, we'll pick her up and bring her into our shelter. In the shelter, we will suggest to her that she brings her prescriptions, she brings her identification, that she brings, a toy for the child, that she brings, but if she can't bring any of those things, just come with your kids and we'll
Right.
figure out the rest. Once she gets to the shelter, we then just sort of have to help her figure out what she wants to do. In our shelter, you can stay for about 45 days.
Uh-huh.
In some shelters, there's more than 2,000 shelters around the country.
Okay.
So those every shelter in a more rural shelters where there's a smaller population, sometimes you can stay for some months in a shelter.
Mm-hmm.
And while you're at the shelter, it's a time for you to think. It's a time for you to talk to us. It's a time for you to talk to other women in your situation. It's a time for you to pray, meditate, whatever it is you do
Right.
to really decide what you want to do. Now, statistically, battered women leave and go back 5 to 7 times.
That's what I heard.
Usually by the time they come to a shelter like ours, like Casa, they've already left and gone to their moms, gone to their friends, so they're down that road a little bit. But if she comes to us and she decides she really needs to go back and try, if he promises her that he's going to be good and all the things he promises, she goes back, we bite our tongues, we bite our lips, and we say, here's your safety plan. Make sure you got all you need, and you're welcome to come back to us if this happens again, so that we feel like we've succeeded if she knows that our door is always open for her, that we're not judging her, we're not judging her decision, because, remember, she's been in a situation where she's been bullied and criticized and cut down to smithereens. I mean, just cut into little bitty pieces.
Her norm could be, for me, somebody yelling at me is
Right.
to me abusive.
But for
in a
her,
sense.
that's
that
kinda
might be the
normal.
norm, right?
That's right. That's right. And so for her, because she sometimes has lived with this situation for such a long time that it feels normal,
Mm-hmm.
and she doesn't have you or me to tell her,
Yeah, that ain't
what the heck's
right.
going on. That isn't good. This isn't right. You didn't cause that. And batters are really good at telling her, well, if you didn't argue with me, if you didn't criticize me, if you didn't,
If you'd had the
didn't
house
burn,
clean,
if you
if you'd
didn't
have
burn
done
the
this.
rice, if you didn't,
Mhm.
a million different reasons that, it's a line that moves all the time.
Mhm.
If you didn't do those things, then, well, and so of course she tries not to do any of those things ever again, but then there's just a different line. That's it. She keeps thinking it's her fault, and it's really
Right.
not.
I have my thought, and this is why I'm discussing this. I want to know what's right and what's wrong
Mhm.
statistically. Anytime a man raises a hand or even threatens,
Yes.
just raises it back and doesn't hit her, but
Mm-hmm.
um,
Or hits the wall, or
mhm.
throws something, even he doesn't hit her.
Right.
All those things are violence. All those things are threats of violence. And abusers, I can give an example. We had a woman who told us her husband put a single bullet, stood it up on end, and just put it on the kitchen counter. Now,
No.
that's a huge threat. Is that going to play well in court? Well, probably not. But for her, she's terrified. So abusers, sometimes women know that there's the raised eyebrow. There's sometimes a phrase, a sentence that he uses that she knows is a threat, and you and I wouldn't
Mhm.
know.
Yeah, we'd say, well, what's wrong with that?
Remember Tuesday?
Mhm.
Well, for her, that's when she got beaten. She almost got beaten to death. So he's just giving
So for her to
warnings.
go to her family and say, but he
said,
said,
"Remember
remember
Tuesday."
Tuesday. Right.
They think she's nuts.
Right.
But she knows, and she's been walking on these eggshells for a really long time. She can often tell by the way he closes the door and walks up the sidewalk after work
So
every
can
day.
kids, and so
Mhm.
can animals.
Absolutely. They all know. And kids and animals are good signs. If you
Mhm.
see an abused child, you often got an abused mom. You see an abused dog, you've often got abused kids and abused adults as well.
Oh, good
So
point.
those are all connected in there. So we work closely with the animal rescue programs and with animal abuse organizations, because sometimes they see it first. Just like we work with the schools, because sometimes they see the abuse of the kids, and sometimes that just tracks back to the mom that's being abused. So all of those, all those signs are really important, and we as a community need to wake up
Right.
and really see them. We don't want to believe it's happening in this nice family who lives in a nice house and who wears nice clothing
we
and drives
party
a nice
with
car.
them and we go out with
That's
them, and how
right.
can that
That's
be?
right.
And he's so great. Or
That's right. We don't want to believe it.
And now there's another side of abuse that we haven't touched on, and that is maybe both parents, maybe mom or dad's at work and it's just mom, a child is being abused.
Yeah. Well, and
Oh
particularly
gosh, this
with
is a
sort of
hard
the
topic for me to
whole
just
domestic
sitting.
violence scenario, is that, sometimes dad beats mom. And because mom knows that if the kids get out of line a
She's in
tiny bit, then
trouble.
she's in trouble. She becomes a very harsh discipliner of the children. No excuse for her. She doesn't have the right to hit the children or to control them in harsh ways. But that's kind of what happens. And sometimes there are moms that are abusive of children. So there's no excuses in there for abuse. It's just never okay to raise that fist. You are in control of your fist.
All right.
You make the choice to hit somebody or not.
Let's stop right there for a second. We're talking about children being abused. All right.
Mm-hmm.
We as adults who do not abuse, what do we watch for? Maybe we're teachers, Sunday school teachers, next door neighbors, school bus drivers. We're a mom at a Girl Scout meeting.
Mm-hmm.
What do we watch for to see? Are there signs that would be definitely red flags that this child's being abused? Because a child may not even, that may be the norm for them. They think that's the norm and they would never report it. Well, no, this is what happens to all kids. Right. What do we as a community, because this is such a sensitive topic for everybody, especially now. What do we watch for?
We watch for, first of all, you watch for the obvious, bruises, injuries, the child that appears accident prone. The parents say, oh, well, she fell down the steps again. That kind of, that can happen in any, everybody's had a terrible time. They had to rush their child to the doctor or the emergency room. But that happens repeatedly to a child. That's one good sign.
Okay.
You see injuries. You see clumps of hair pulled out, for instance.
Oh.
You'll see, bruises that look suspicious. And children often react in a bunch of different ways. Children that are in trouble sometimes are very, act out in class. And this is the difficult child to deal with in class. Because this kid's saying, I'm in trouble, I need help. So that's one sign. You sometimes see the perfect child, the child that is terrified not to get perfect grades, the child that's terrified that, there's a spot on her dress, the child that's terrified, if he doesn't do exactly what mommy told him to do at exactly the right time, or daddy. You watch those, and if you ask a child, are you afraid at home? And they say yes. Well, that's a great sign.
Right.
But
do you get involved? I mean, how do you?
Well, you got to, if it's a
protect the child? Do you contact the authorities?
Yeah.
And say, I suspect?
Yeah. As a child, if you know about a child, we are in Florida now. We are all mandated reporters. That means that you can call that child abuse hotline, which you can get online, or you can call the police department. Call that child abuse hotline if you suspect. You give the information, give an address for the child where that child can be found, and depending upon the severity of what you describe, the police, the investigators, social workers have to be out there within, sometimes within 4 hours, within 24 hours, depending upon the severity. So they have to go out and investigate anytime there's child abuse. So child abuse has its own special field and people out there that are going to be out there immediately. So if you're a teacher or a family member and you think something's happened bad to this child, report it immediately. Report it to that child abuse hotline. Then in Florida,
do we run the risk though of, let's say that child really was clumsy, all right, and we reported it, and is there a threat that the child could be taken by social services and it wasn't? You just see the tightrope that we.
But if you were that child,
yes.
and you were in trouble, wouldn't you want somebody to report for you? If you're Lisa, if you're a child seeing this, if you're a child experiencing the violence and you're afraid for yourself and your own safety, we as adults have the responsibility always to report child abuse. Always, always. Anytime we suspect it. Yes, the system can come out, but you know what? I would still think it's better the system comes out and checks on it to make sure that child is okay than for this child to be killed and we knew something was happening and we didn't say anything.
Right.
on the other side with an adult, there's no required abuse reporting, and you really have to take her lead or his lead. When you've got an adult who's a victim, you have to really help that person feel empowered enough to be able to make their own report. Or if I'm talking on a crisis line, I will say to, if I say, are you in a safe position right now? And she'll say, no. I said, I'm going to ask you some questions. I just want you to say yes or no to them.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want me to call the police? And she says, yes. I said, I'm going to keep you on, I'll say to her, I'm going to keep you on the line while I make this call for you. You tell, if you need to tell somebody, tell them tell them I'm a vendor and I'm selling you an air conditioner. Tell them something, whatever would work in your case. Tell them I'm the lawnmower. I'm whoever would work.
Right.
That you would be talking to, and I'm just going to keep you on the line, and you can just chat away and tell me about your dog, tell me about your child, tell me about your day. I'm going to keep you on the line, and then I will call the police for them, and I can connect them that way. But she's got to give me permission to do that. I'm not going to do that for her if she doesn't give me permission.
Right.
If she, sometimes I'll talk her through, okay, can you get to a safe place and then call me later? Sometimes she can do that. I said,
Okay.
So there's just different times where, and we're our crisis line, that's 727-895-4912.
It should be on the screen.
727-895-4912. That's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can call that crisis line number, and we're there.
And there's
we
a
can
place
talk
of
you
safety
through, and there's
for
a place of safety. And if you're listening to this in Arkansas or California, you can call that number too, and we'll be there, and we'll tell you where the closest domestic violence center is.
Oh, that's great.
To wherever you're calling from. We can do that for you. The thing is for us, it's, go to our webpage. We can provide lots of services. We can, sometimes women call and describe a situation. Is this domestic violence? And I'm sure in most cases she kind of knows it is.
Yeah.
But she wants us to validate what's going on for her, what's happening. We're happy to do that for her. And we're happy to say, yes, that's domestic violence, and I'm really worried about you. I'm worried about your safety. Here's some things you need to, here's some things I suggest. Let's keep talking. What is it you want to do? What are you feeling like now? What made you call me now?
Right.
What happened just a minute ago? What happened a half an hour ago? Is he not there now? Did he leave? Did he fall asleep? Is he drunk? Is he passed out? Did you manage to go to your mom's house? And are you safe now? Those are all things that I'm going to ask her.
Now, because this is nonprofit month, what can our listeners do? What's the best way that they can help CASA?
Well, of course, the best way they can help CASA is to provide us with the funds to keep going.
They can make a donation on your website?
On our website. They can call us. They can send us a check. They can make that donation to us, and we're very grateful for that. They can also go to their local domestic violence center and volunteer. We all use volunteers. We all have training that we can provide. And if you just want to do something, we have a thrift store. Many domestic violence centers have thrift stores. You can come to our thrift stores and volunteer there, which is less threatening perhaps than working at a
because
shelter.
I want you to talk us through every step of the process that a family has to go through if they contact CASA.
Sure.
Because they may have to get out by the skin of their teeth, and a neighbor rushes them out and they have no clothes, no shoes for the kids or whatever. They got out with the things on their back. So you
we
wouldn't
provide
think
those
about
things.
Yeah,
so
you wouldn't think about that.
And those are your clothes that you donated to us. You cleaned out and decided you didn't need those clothes anymore. Bring them to our thrift store.
Where is your thrift store?
Our thrift store is 1011 First Avenue North in St. Petersburg.
1011
First Avenue North in St. Petersburg, and that's right below my office. So if you call us, we can give you that address, or you can find that address on our webpage, www.casa-stpete.org. And there we'll take, household supplies, furniture, clothing, and women, when they come in to us, get what we call a gift certificate. They can get, if they're in our shelter, they'll get a small little gift certificate just to get what they need. And if they get a job, we'll give them another gift certificate so they can get clothes to work, where to work. And when they leave our shelter, we give them a big gift certificate.
Explain shelter. There's a stigma with that word. When I hear shelter, I'm thinking of dogs and cats, and it's not a pretty picture. So we should come up with a new word for that. A safe house or something. I don't know. And that sounds criminal.
is a safe house, and that's a good way to.
I know. It's just I don't know what it just.
We do our best to try to. Our shelter is an old house. It has 6 bedrooms. It's a warm, cozy place. We really do our very best to try to make it. When we walk into the place, they feel like I'm here. I'm someplace safe.
Safe.
It's a tough place to be.
How
because
safe
you're
are
shared.
they, Linda? I mean,
well,
from,
we've never had anybody break into the shelter.
Okay.
We sometimes have abusers show up at the shelter, but we can usually turn them away because or we call the police. And if you trespass on our property, it's a felony in Florida. So we can be pretty strong, and most abusers don't really want you and me to know that they're abusing their partners.
Right.
I could meet an abuser in the parking lot and say, is there a reason why your wife or your girlfriend would be in a battered women's shelter?
Yeah.
And mostly they turn tail and run, or walk away. Oh, no. I'm just, that doesn't mean that all abusers will. And so we're always prepared. Our doors are always locked. We have security. So we're always on alert. We watch our parking lot.
I'm sure the police do too.
Yeah. And I believe the police do. And if we call them and tell them it's an emergency, they're there very quickly, so we get good support from the law enforcement. But the shelter we have food, we have clothes, we have toys for the children, we have games and fun things for the kids. My favorite thing to see is a child walking in, holding on mom's skirts, hiding behind mom, and then 2 weeks later, the child saying, Mom, do we have to leave? I've got friends here now, so children feeling safe. It's holiday time now. We hear kids say things like, this is the best holiday I ever had.
Yeah.
It's the best Christmas. It's the best holiday I ever had.
That has to be very rewarding.
It's rewarding and heartbreaking at the same time when you think about that, because the community is very generous with us. They give us toys so we can give mom, just today, for instance, we have our conference room. We turn it into our holiday central, and we have a program we call Hope for the Holidays, and people donate toys and gifts for the women. And the moms come in and shop for their kids. We put quotes around shopping. They get things for kids, and we bring the kids in, and they get to shop for their mom. And then we make a big bag for each to take away. And so they have a great holiday, and that's because our community supports us tremendously. We couldn't do it without the community. I always say it takes a whole community to stop domestic violence.
Yes.
Everything from donating to us and participating and volunteering. We're all nonprofit organizations, so if you're inclined, we need board members. We need volunteers working in our shelters. We need volunteers working with the children. And yes, the good men out there, we use men as volunteers too. We're delighted to have you. We train you and whatever your job is as a volunteer. So don't worry if
what kind of volunteerism could someone expect if they called you up? I mean,
sure.
do you say, well, we really need somebody to volunteer 4 hours a week if you can, or we need the phone lines manned from these hours to these hours? I mean, do you kind of work with the people?
Yes. So we'll provide a volunteer. If you just want to bring a group and want to do the yard out in front of our buildings, we're happy to provide you there. If you want to bring a group and do paint up and fix it inside, we're happy to have that. If you want to answer our crisis line, we're going to require you to go through some training before we do that. But we're happy to have you answer our crisis line. You can sort food and make sure that all of the canned goods in our cupboards are up to date.
There's always something they can do.
You can do paperwork. You can answer the phone at the front desk. There's just, and I always say, and we're always open. We're open 24 hours a day. So don't tell me you can't fit it into your schedule.
Right.
We're always there.
Right. Even somebody that, like I said, there are people that are night owls, and they're all they're doing at night is just, casing the internet, where they could be actually manning some phone lines.
That's right. That's right. We have volunteers that volunteer on the weekends. We have volunteers that volunteer at night.
Now, do volunteers, if they're like operators, to take these domestic calls, and I would imagine they come at all hours of the night, but do they have to go to your location, or is this something that you can
usually
forward
they do
their
have
calls?
to go, and now we're required to have them come to our location. In the older days, we were able to forward our calls, but now they require the staff and the phone to be answered at our location. I'm hoping
now,
that
why is that? Is it for them tracking or tracing the call?
It's for standards, yes, and I think it's for our standards at this moment. I'm thinking that as we get more sophisticated, that probably that will change in a different way also. But right now, that's what our standards require. And we'll train, and we need to make sure they're trained. we also need, confidentiality is a really important thing.
I
So
would
if you're
imagine.
answering these phones at your house, you would need to say hello casa on your home
I
phone.
see.
That might not work very well either. If your children answered or if your partner answered, everybody would need to be trained.
Right.
So that's how we work right now. And so if you want to work with children, for instance, we will train you. We have an after school program for our kids in the shelter. Our kids all go to school. We provide tutors because mostly they're 2 to 3 years behind in school. Kids are.
No kidding.
Yeah,
Wow.
I mean, you can imagine if you're a 6-year-old or a 10-year-old and you're going to school and you're worried about whether mom's gonna be alive when you get home, you're not going to do very well in school. Because, and I always say, about half of the kids in homes where mom is being beaten by dad or vice versa, about half of the kids are physically abused, but 100% of the kids are emotionally abused. It's emotionally abusive to watch your dad hit your mom. It's emotionally abusive to worry about, being 6 years old or 10 years old and thinking you're going to have to save your mom's life. A startling statistic, a huge number of young boys between the ages of 11 and 21 are in juvenile detention or in prison today because they saved their mom's lives, or because they tried to save their mom's life.
Are you kidding me?
No, unfortunately, we're beginning to look at that a little differently now, but still, that's often what happens. And that's probably for women who are struggling to decide whether to leave. When they start seeing how emotionally affected it is affecting their children, both the little girls and the little boys, that sometimes for her is when she says, "Okay, I'm done. I have to leave because my little boy is now abusing me, because my little boy is talking to me the way their father is talking to me." And in the shelter, sometimes we'll have 4 or 5-year-old little boys who say, "I don't know if I want to grow up to be a man because I don't know any nice men."
Oh my
Doesn't
goodness.
it breaks our hearts. And it's one of the reasons why we have good men working, volunteering in our shelters, because we want these children to see some good men.
A couple weeks ago, we had Big Brothers and Big Sisters on, and it was very heartwarming to hear what these Big Brothers do. And the statistics were just shocking, actually, the number of kids that are
don't have
without
male role models.
Yeah. And so in light of what happened last week in Colorado, so tragic, that kind of violence, it's you wonder what is happening in our nation. And of course, I know it's around the world, but we're focusing on the nation right now, and more specifically in the Florida area. But what is happening to where it's an epidemic? Now, I remember when I was growing up, and it was not uncommon at all where I grew up to see every single man on our street beat his wife. It was not uncommon. It was a common occurrence when I was growing up, to where I actually thought that was the norm. And until I was about 15, I guess, is when I realized, this is not right. And I would also see those fathers beat their daughters quite. And nobody ever stepped up and said, "Don't do that." I mean, one time my father and some men tried to hold a father from beating his daughter. He was beating her pretty bad, and it took 2 men to pull this little guy off of his daughter. It was horrifying to see that as a kid, my age, being 10, 11 years old at the time, and seeing something like that. And it seems now, I mean, again, without sounding like I'm pointing fingers or looking for somebody to blame, because I really have a problem when people do that. I mean, I'm having a problem with it right now with pointing a finger that it's all, guns and this and that. There's so much violence on television. There's so much violence on the net. I mean, there's violence in movies. There's violence everywhere. And there is no possible way that it's like trying to determine, where you're going to get a cup of water out of this ocean. It's like, it's impossible to know where this thing is coming from, because it's been with us for so long that I think our society is almost warped as far as like, what constitutes violence.
That's right.
It does that's why I asked you at the start of the show. where do they cross the line? Because a woman can be, I do life coaching. So I talk to people who are being verbally abused or emotionally abused to where they don't feel that they have, they're worthy, or they don't deserve, or maybe they came out of a relationship, or maybe it was their father, but they somehow or another got this notion. Otherwise, we'd never see all these positive quotes floating around. We'd never see these things that, you're worth it, and,
Right.
you're of value, and nobody's going to respect you until you respect yourself, and blah, 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 blah. But how do we as a society, given the number of years of experience that you've been with CASA, where do we start in changing? If a woman gets out of an abusive situation and now she's safe, she's with her children, and she may think, "Oh, I got a job now, and I'm, me and the kids are okay." It doesn't stop there.
Not necessarily.
Those children have already watched, witnessed,
That's right.
and they may be in a safe place now with mom, and dad may be completely out of the picture. He may even be in jail. But what does the mom do now to make sure that the children
Right.
don't continue on with this warped? She's going to need counseling. I mean,
She's gonna need
geez,
counseling.
I don't even know how to ask the questions. I got so many.
That she's going to need counseling. The kids are going to need counseling. We have a program in our community that we can send our kids to. Sometimes we see kids in the shelter that are in such deep trouble that we really work hard to connect them with some of the counseling programs that are available in our community. Every community has some counseling programs, even if it's just somebody in a local church or a synagogue. Every community has some place that can talk to the kids. The kids particularly need help. They need to know that, it's not their fault that this happened, because sometimes kids blame themselves. It's not their fault that they didn't save mommy, from getting hit.
They didn't clean up their room.
It's not
and
their fault.
Daddy starts beating mommy.
None of those things are their fault. Nothing that they could do justifies dad's behavior towards mom or even towards them. There's really nothing that anybody can do that justifies that fist. That's not okay. So we start with the kids, just helping them understand that. And then we just really sometimes have to really help them see differently how we have a peacemakers program, for instance, in our, that's a prevention program. We start out with high school kids. We now work with preschoolers, elementary schoolers, and middle schoolers, because high school kids are already too late in many cases.
Yeah.
So we have programs that we teach kids as early as 4, 5, and 6 years old. Peaceful words. How do you use some good words to tell me when you don't like what's going on? How do you solve problems? We have a peace table that we teach them skills how to go. We use puppets to kind of to carry the story for the small children. And then when we get to the elementary and middle school age children or youths, we're really talking about gender role stereotypes. We're talking about their ideas of what girls and boys do.
Okay.
We talk to them about bullying, because that's the beginning of it.
Sure.
We talk to them about what to do, what else you could do besides bullying, when a kid's doing something you don't like. How do we, and we really talk through, we have a unit on self-esteem. We have a unit on bullying. We have a unit on, being kind to the earth. We have a unit on race, because that's often involved sometimes. So we have numbers of different units of prevention programs with our Peacemakers program that we get into the schools, and whenever we're invited in by a teacher, and we really try to do some prevention work. So those are some of the things we can do for
So you can go into schools
range.
and
Yes,
kind
we
of talk
can.
to the kids and let them
Yes, we can.
help them to recognize what is not the norm. That's good.
can.
Now I know we've only got a few minutes here, and there's a few things that I want us to be able to repeat.
Sure.
First of all, if you are a woman or someone that's in danger and you feel that you need to get out and this is your opportunity, this might be a godsend for you. You can, you want to give your telephone number
Sure.
again?
It's
You can reach CASA.
727-895-4912. 727-895-4912 is our local crisis line. You can call that number. We'll connect you with the domestic violence center closest to you. You can also, if today is not the day, then when you want to do something, call us tomorrow.
Right.
Do talk to somebody.
Or check out your website
Yep,
at CASA.
It's
Go ahead.
www.casa-stpete.org, casa-stpete.org. Just go there and learn. Sometimes people are curious to know what domestic violence really is. There's a wealth of information on that website that you can go and learn about.
Yes, there is. I've already explored it. And not only that, but if you can't remember some of this stuff today, you can remember me. You can remember talking with Gloria. And this show is going to be podcasted. It will be on my website forever. And you can, if it's not there for the week in the main page that you're watching it from right now, it will be in the archives. So you can always, and it'll be under, we're going to put it under CASA Domestic Violence. So you'll be able to find it that way.
Right.
So if you can't remember all the stuff and the kids are screaming right now as you're trying to watch this and trying to remember some information, you can always remember talking with Gloria, and you can go to the website and you can find CASA under domestic violence, and we'll make sure we always keep it there for you. And think about your children. Think about this. They're here to help you. Now, for those of you that are tuning in and thinking, okay, I'm not in domestic violence. I don't know anybody in domestic violence. There's ways that you can help CASA. You can help, as we've just mentioned to discuss. If you have clothes, good clothing that you can give, children's clothing, women's clothing.
Right.
What else could they?
And household goods. I mean, think about if you were to walk out of your house right now with nothing, what would you need? And we bring whatever that is. Bring whatever that is. You can donate those things. So you need clothes, you need household supplies, you need beds, you need cleaning supplies, all the things that you have in your house. We need all of those things. Also, you can
and
just
money.
Yeah,
money works good. If you don't have something that is, and I've always said to people, if they're gonna pass something along like clothing or something, if it's not something you'd put on yourself, don't give it away. Throw it away.
Thank you.
And so this is something that's going on some child or some woman that's in trouble. And and this is the holiday season, and there are families that need your help. And this is a show that I was, oh boy, I can't even tell you. I couldn't get my mind off of it today because it's not a topic that anybody likes to talk about. And it's not an issue that we as a nation like to admit is out there. It's kind of like with pedophiles and children being abused. It's like, oh gosh, I just don't want to hear that. I don't want that around me. And that's true. We don't, but we can't stick our head in the sand and pretend like it's not there. Okay. There is a real problem in this nation, in this city, in this community. How can we help stop it? How can we help the women to get out? How can we help the children? And one more time, let's run it by our listeners.
895-4912. That's area code 727. That's our crisis line number, or casa-stpete.org. You can help by volunteering. You can help by sending us a check. You can help by buying diapers. We feed lots of people, so we need food. We need, all the pots and pans that you cook that food. So all those things.
Yeah,
you can get involved.
anything. I think we are running out of time here. I think I don't see my cue in there, but I'm guessing that we're probably about out of time. But this is the last show for the season for 2012 of Talking with Gloria. But that means that the first week, the 8th of January, we'll have a Michelle Penn will be in the studio with me, and go to my website, talkingwithgloria.com, and go to the events calendar and make sure you check out some of the awesome guests that I've got coming on at the beginning of the year. We're also going to have a fitness expert. If you haven't already seen that on the page, elite training, personal training. I can tell you right now, they're already kicking my butt. And if you obviously want to start the new year off getting healthy, getting fit, and that is a great place to start. I am so thrilled with my listeners because I've gotten such great feedback from people that have been tuning in during this month of nonprofits and wanting to reach out to their community in some way. And Linda, I just can't thank you enough for coming in.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
And we really do here at TalkWad Network. Appreciate you being here. TalkWad.com. You have to absolutely check out all of the different shows that are available to you. And thank you so much for tuning in to Talking with Gloria. And make sure that you mark your calendar for January 8th, because we'll be coming at you with some great shows starting in January. It's been a great year, but a year that I'm ready to close.
Yeah.
How about you, Linda?
Oh, absolutely. But I want to wish everybody a happy new year and happy
Yes.
holidays. Next year will be a way we can start all over and start fresh.
That's right. All right, everybody. You guys have a great week and a great weekend. And more than anything, have a very, very safe holiday. My love to all of you. Thanks for tuning in.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in.
She has a wonderful personality. She really does.
You are listening